I guess this is dating me a little bit, and I'm sure some of you have seen the movies that came out that were based on this series, but I grew up watching the TV series, the Mission Impossible. I really enjoyed it, actually. I remember watching this. This is one of the few shows that my dad and I watched together. And he and I liked it because of what seemed like such cool high-tech things back in the 70s and whatnot, about how they accomplished the missions. For those of you who are not familiar with this TV show, it was basically this TV show where this team of people would infiltrate nations, prisons, I don't know, whatever was necessary that somehow had an effect on our national security or the world's security, and they'd have to go and accomplish a mission, helping someone escape, or stealing something, or putting something back. And at every show, the way it began is with this theme music. I don't even want to try to reproduce it, but if you've seen the movies, it has that same theme music. And then, in the beginning of each show, it starts, back then it was a little cassette tape. I don't know what they use now, it's like a phone or a USB or whatever. But the audio message would say basically, your mission, and then basically whoever the main guy was that week, should you choose to accept it is, and there's some crazy thing that they're supposed to do. And then, this message will self-destruct in 10 seconds, and then that's all. That's the way it started every single episode. And I don't know about you guys, but that may seem like, okay, well, that's a movie. What does that have to do with what you're going to be talking about today? I don't know about you guys, but every once in a while, I get to a place where I feel like the things that I'm supposed to do with my life are impossible, or overwhelming. I know we've had some babies and new ones that come in and all the hope and all the whatnot that goes on. But when you think about actually raising a child until they go off to college or even beyond, that's an impossible task that you have, in a sense. I'm not trying to discourage any of you. When you think about your life and if you think about all the things that you're going to have obstacles and all the things that you're going to face and struggle with at some point in your life, and if you think about it, and then you think about, then what can I really do? What difference can I really make? And then last week, I gave you guys another one where I said, you know what God calls all the church and all the people that believe in Him to do is to go and transform and radically evangelize, radically tell the truth of who Jesus Christ is to this whole world. That's our task. And, it's given in the words of, go and be my witnesses to the ends of the world. Go and make disciples of every nation. And so we have these incredibly large tasks and purposes that are given to us. And when it's big, when it's, the whole thing is given to us at once, it's hard to digest. It's hard to swallow. And it's often overwhelming. I don't go through this a lot because I tend to be very positive, more like, just go ahead and do it and just roll up my sleeves kind of person. But every once in a while, I sit there at night in my room and I think about raising my two girls, and it gets really bleak. Not because they're bad, not because I think I'm a bad parent, but just the fact that these two lives are so intricately tied with mine, and the decisions that I make affect them so much. Right? And now, I didn't really feel the pressure or the stress of it, but Catherine has her first SAT in June, and so I'm like, oh yeah, she'll literally be going off to college next year sometime. It's just a weird thing. It's time to launch. It's getting the rocket all prepared, and hopefully it won't explode in my face. It'll actually launch, right? That's what you kind of think of. I'm sorry, I'm so engineering, geeky, techy, whatever, but literally that's what you're doing with your children. At some point, they leave. And there's a sense of relief, but there's also a sense of fear. And in anything that we're given to do, the first time that we even try to accomplish anything, there's a sense, and maybe we go, okay, I'll just tackle this, but there's a sense where it could be kind of overwhelming. And this is why I love what Acts chapter 13, verse 36 says, because in the midst of this incredible revival, where all these incredible missionaries and mission work is being done, where literally the ends of the earth, the known world at that time, the gospel is starting to go, we get this little reminder of King David. And I know he wasn't a minor guy, he was a big guy, but the whole definition that is given of his life is that he served God's purpose in his life. And if you ever find yourself overwhelmed, discouraged, or downtrodden, if you ever find like, this is too much for me, I have too many responsibilities, I have too much burdens, I have too many, to-do list thing, if you ever feel like that, the great thing to do is go back and look at something like this, which says is all you need to focus on. And say, God, what is my purpose for my life? That's it. You're going to take care of how everything else fits together. And if we're honestly and sincerely pursuing this goal, whether or not we make a lot of mistakes along the way, that's not the point. As long as we consistently, genuinely, and wholeheartedly pursue this goal, what's going to happen is everything will work out in the end. I don't want to make this a sermon about David, but if you look at the life of David, it's a very interesting life. To me, he's one of the most complex and interesting characters in the Old Testament. When I first knew about him as a Sunday school kid, I thought, that's my favorite guy. He kills Goliath. He kills lions. He's just, he's the youngest and the smallest, but he's the most amazing. He becomes the king, right? I mean, just all these exploits that he has. So he's like, very charismatic and very attractive figure. But later on, when I began to really learn about the Bible, and I started about it, he had a lot of character flaws. He had a lot of issues. Literally his own son tries to kill him. Can you imagine in your family? You build up an empire, or you get some kind of notoriety or fame, or you're the king, but all your son wants to do is kill you and have a coup and take over. That's a pretty dysfunctional family. He starts out well, and he does all these things that God gives him and calls him to, and he does an amazing job in many ways of leading the nation of Israel against all its enemies, but in some of the small areas and some of the other things you can see disaster strikes. He commits adultery. He has these relationships that just mess up his life. He ends up killing one of his most trusted soldiers to cover up his own sin. It just becomes a mess. And so somewhere along the line we might feel like, I've made a mess of my life, or all these responsibilities, I can't handle them, or just all these burdens and pressures come into our life. And then, you come on to church on Sunday and says, now your goal is to share the gospel with every single person that you know, all your family, all your friends, and everybody else. And we have that responsibility of evangelizing this whole world. And so we get all these incredibly large, big tasks put upon our shoulders. What I want to encourage you guys to do in the midst of all of that is this. Become as centered as you can in knowing how God created you. And knowing that He created you with a very unique, simple task. And that's all you need to hold on to. And that's all you need to focus on. I remember when I was a kid, and I don't really remember the exact scenario or situation, what was going on, but they were building something in the backyard of my dad's friend's house, and I was old enough and big enough to help, but not really understanding what was going on. So they were building some stuff, and all these guys were holding on to these things, and one of my dad's friends pulled me over and said, stand right here. Grab this, I don't even know if it was a rope or a piece of wood or whatever, and just hold on and don't let go. So I'm there, I'm like, even if this kills me, I'm going to hold on, right? Because, I'm there and I'm being treated like a man. I had no idea what was going on. Later on, I realized they were raising up some foundation for the overhang on the thing, for the deck that they were building together. Or what? I don't remember exactly all the details, but I just need to hold on to that. And they trusted me just to hold on to that. And I was, weighed enough and was big enough to hold on to that. No other explanation was given. But at the end of that, and everything went on, yep, I beat that. I had a part of that, right? I mean, as a little kid, like 12 or 13 or whatever I was, And that's really what God is trying to tell all of us. Yes, there's this huge mission. It's way bigger. I mean, it's not even like as small as it's something humongous. It's something beyond our own imagination. But God is the architect. He's the engineer. He's the one that puts all of that together. And what He's saying is be faithful and discover who you are exactly what you have, and you just cling on and hold on until I say let go. And the time that he says let go is when he says come home and be with me. That's all. And when you put it into that perspective, it becomes so much easier. And this is what I do to myself all the time. I go like, it is not my job to make amazing women out of my daughters. That is not my job. My job is to live as honestly and as faithfully to God before them, and to explain why I make the decisions I make before them. And I'm going to make all kinds of mistakes. I've made all kinds of mistakes. And in so doing, then the responsibility of what they become and who they develop into and how God's created them is upon God and upon themselves. All I'm supposed to, I ultimately, I can't beat myself up for anything that happens with me. Yes, I affect them. But if I can genuinely say I've done my best, not to mold or shape or influence them, but rather to really be the person that God calls me to be in all my flaws, and to admit that and just to live that takes a world of burden off of our shoulders. Now, I see sometimes parents trying to think about how do I get my kid to this school? Is your kid supposed to go to that school? And I look at some of my friends and some of the parents, I see some of them, and it's amazing to me because I often find that the parents that don't stress out and push their kids, they teach them about hard work and all these things. They're the ones that go to the best colleges and really develop. But the ones that are like, you have to go to Harvard, you have to go to Cal, you have to go to here, and put all this pressure, they're like the ones that are freaking out, and later on, they don't like their parents, and they go to a mediocre school. Yeah, that's the reality of the experience that I've seen. Because your kids are not dumb. They know that when your goal is this school or this thing or that, they feel like, do you care about me or what I'm about? Or what my uniqueness is. And sometimes we get so caught up in that, and it's so hard to believe that. I want to just encourage you guys. We are created in unique and wonderful ways. And so this morning, I just want to touch on that real quickly. If you want afterwards, I forgot to give it earlier, but I have this little handout. It's just a reminder. You can take it with you when you go. But I learned this a number of years ago, and the one that kind of coined it was Pastor Rick Warren in Saddleback Church over there in the Saddleback Valley near Irvine. And I just thought it was a very easy way for us to remember. And he's such an encouraging person in the sense that he says, look, this is what you need to know about your leadership. He's done amazing, great things, built up this huge church, wrote one of the most influential books. I don't know if you know about him a little bit, but he's this pastor. And the thing I loved about him that always drew me to him is that the first time I went to his church, when I had a chance on a Sunday to just go worship, he was wearing flip-flops, torn jeans, and orange shirt. I just thought man, that's the way it should be in all the churches. But very casual environment in Southern California. I know not everybody's but not only that, but he just talked just in a very, not like at you, not preachy, not whatever, but just sharing about his life and stuff like that. He makes things very accessible, and he's saying, great things come and happen. And you're yourself, and you discover who you are, and you figure out your purpose. That's all. And so he came up with this acronym, SHAPE. What's your shape? S-H-A-P-E. I may have mentioned before. Hopefully. But let me just give it to you real quick so you guys know what those letters stand for. S is for spiritual gifts. And we'll talk about that a little bit today, but I'm not going to talk about everything in detail. The next one is heart, or passion, or enthusiasm. The next one is abilities, what talents and abilities do you have. And then P is for personality, and then E is for experiences. And if you look at all those things together, each one of those, if you they're representing some things bigger, and it's not exhaustive, but if you really look at these main categories, it actually does a pretty good job of defining who you are. What spiritual gifts do you have? What passions and heart do you have? What abilities and talents do you have? What's your personality, and what kind of experiences do you have? And when you put those things together, you can discover? You can discover how God is uniquely shaping you for a specific purpose that you're going to be amazing. the first thing that I want to point out to you about all of this is spiritual gifts. And the reason I point out spiritual gifts is because spiritual gifts are something that are given to people who believe in God by the Holy Spirit. So it's something that's different. Everything else, H-A-P-E, heart, abilities, personality, experience, those are all also given to you by God, but they're given to you, everybody, whether you're a Christian or not. They're just part of you being made in the image of God. And to me, what's amazing is as you get older and you see your kids grow up and you see them, get older, you see how this radically transforms and changes. But it's amazing that something that you saw an inkling of when they were just little tiny babies, the stubborn temperament turns out to be some kind of leadership or something bad. I don't know. But sometimes you have that, right? They have this like creativity that develops into something else. It's amazing to see that thread that they were already born with it. A lot of things they were just already born with. God created them in a unique way. But the thing that when you put all these together, you see that God is orchestrating. First thing I want to point out to you is spiritual gifts. And if you look, you don't need to turn there again this morning, but I'm just going to kind of read them to you. But in 1 Corinthians, Paul's talking to the Corinthian church about spiritual gifts. And it seems that a lot of the people knew about spiritual gifts and they were talking about it, but it wasn't really, it wasn't something like, that was just organized and systematically written down. But it just seemed like there was a lot of general knowledge that people had, maybe because as they talked back and forth and whatnot, and because they lived in an era that was much more spiritual. What I mean by that is we live in a generation where everything is explained by technology, education, science, theories, whatnot. We're not as spiritual in the sense that we don't give things spiritual significance quite as much. When something happens, we go like, just kind of sometimes pass by. Maybe we'll return to that a little bit now, but there's more spiritual significance. Well, I wonder why God allowed that, or I wonder why this happened, or I wonder if that's a spiritual thing that God's doing in my heart, or my life, or urging. Was that the voice of God? And is that something that God caused, that scenario, that situation? Or maybe God's bringing me into this job, bringing me into this relationship, into this place. Or at this time, so I can run to this person. But spiritual gifts were much more recognized and easily accepted by the people there. When I read about older times and different cultures and societies, what you find is in every village or small town, there's the wise woman or the wise man. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's the old person too. And they almost have prophetic, vision and ability to see things, and they're like they all come to her for blessing. They all come to him for wisdom for situations and scenarios. And so in most societies they have somebody like that. They have people who play these various roles that kind of have an inkling of what's going to happen, and they kind of. And I'm not trying to explain all of that, but what I want to point out to you is the reason why it's so much more acceptable back in the day is. And we have a hard time now is because we're so much more pragmatic about it. But when you look at spiritual gifts, they almost seem like something, an anachronism out of time. But the spiritual gifts that God talks about are actually based on a lot of these human abilities that God gave to us that certain people, even without knowing God, were able to develop and use to a certain extent. But then when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, the source of your inspiration, insight, and direction is now the Spirit of God. In other words, there has always been shamans and witch doctors and in different cultures that had an ability to heal that seemed beyond whatever potions and things that they put together. Well, likewise, I do believe that there's a gift of healing that God gives. I don't know exactly how it all works out, but some people are gifted in such a way that when they pray for certain other people, that more rapid healing or miraculous healing or just better recovery seems to happen. And I don't know how to explain that, but it's the Spirit of God using this person. And the thing about spiritual gifts is there's healing, there's prophecy, there's words of wisdom, there's discernment of spirit, there's all these different things that you can go and look around. But ultimately what I want to say is when their source of power is the Holy Spirit and their purpose is to bring unity to the church, to serve other people, and I usually say that's kind of the identification of spiritual gifts that God gives. This is not the time to do all of those things or to argue back and forth, but to me, for anyone to say that the spiritual gifts aren't existing today doesn't make any sense, because the need for the church to be unified, for us to serve one another by the power of God, never goes away. You can argue about speaking in tongues and about interpretation of tongues, and you can argue about healing and whatever, because they're all very personal things. You guys know my own story about how I prayed so much for my wife to be healed, and I prayed, and there's other things that are weird, because I don't really practice it as much, but I prayed for some people in certain situations where it just crazy things have happened. And it's not because of me, it's because of the power of God. And because God in that instant wanted to encourage or heal or do something through the agency of another person. And I have to believe that sometimes when I'm preaching, maybe not often, but it's not just me, it's the Spirit of God that's actually forming the word so that it's something that will inspire or hit you in a way that's beyond my ability to do so. So you guys get what I'm saying. So I can't go and unpack this whole spiritual giftings, but you all have them. And if you're interested, I have some surveys that you guys can do, at least about the biblical ones that are written down, that you can kind of figure out what spiritual gifts you have. But the reality is that when you identify some of those things, that's great, but just identifying it isn't enough. Just to know that you have a musical ability or athletic ability or some kind of creative bent, it's nothing unless you begin to use it, exercise it, and develop it. So spiritual gifts are part of what God's going to give you in order for you to fulfill your mission for Him. I really believe that. But then there's these other things that God's already placed within you and that God is working in you, that when you bring all these things together, then you'll get a much clearer idea of what your purpose, your specific purpose is. Ultimately, all of our purposes is that cog in that wheel, in that machinery of presenting the whole world the gospel of Jesus Christ. So hopefully, just in the latter part, in the next 10 minutes, I'll be able to kind of unfold and help you to see that. I'm not going to go deep into any of these things, but I'm just going to kind of run through them really quick, because I think a lot of them are kind of commonsensical. But if you look at heart or passion or enthusiasm, I think it's God-given. I think we have it from a young age. Just certain things just click within us. It could be a sport. It could be music. It could be reading. It could be people. It could be, I don't know. I mean, some things that come out and we may kind of laugh at or think it's a negative thing, but the cartoons or the jokes where some woman says, "My superpower is shopping," or "My superpower is this or that." It may seem silly, but there's something there that's God-given that actually makes you better. I actually have a good friend from college who was just very artistic, and we all just thought she was kind of a little bit ditzy, never did anything, was necessary to do all that other stuff. But what was amazing is that she knew, what was good fashion. Like, when she would go shopping and she would buy something, then it was the thing that took off all the time. And she was from a fairly wealthy family, so we said, okay, she'll just be this gifted shopper or whatever. But guess what? She met this guy that was the son of the founder of one of those big, I don't know, the Saks, whatever, one of those kind of stores. And he just saw that she was just really good at it, and somehow they ran around the same circles. And out of college, like 22 years old, she became one of the main buyers for that whole empire, back in the day when they did. And so she was making hundreds of thousands of dollars out of it. And we're all like, what in the world, right? But she was just doing what she was just gifted and hard and just had a passion for. And it was amazing. And that's the thing. Don't ever despise any of those things, because that's the unique grain, that's the unique bent, that's the unique something about you that there is. And so oftentimes the heart and that enthusiasm, usually it's tied with some ability to do something, and so those things can be tied together. And that's the beauty of it. If you can take your passion and take the abilities and tie them together, you're already along the way quite good. There was a young lady that was in the church, the same church that I was, and when she was graduating from college, she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do for her career. And she was a liberal arts major, as often want when you're not quite sure, but her parents had been pushing her towards going to medical school and being a doctor. Her uncle was a doctor, her dad was a doctor, and she was actually very bright, very smart. Everything she did, she was doing. And so she kind of decided, okay, well, I don't know, so I guess I'll apply for med school and take the test. And she just did phenomenally well on the test. And she got accepted to all the medical schools that she applied to. I mean, she had a great GPA, all this. Just one of those kids, that just academically just gifted. And she started med school, and she hated it miserably. And she came back from med school one time. She said, I think I'm about to drop out. I don't know how to tell my parents. She had all this debt now. She had spent a year or so in med school. And she just went, it's just not me. I just can't do it. So somehow she ended up telling her parents. Her parents freaked out, but eventually got over it. She came out, and she actually became a teacher at a school. So I always liked kids. Then she started being a teacher, and she just really began to enjoy it. And then all of a sudden, in her heart, she had this heart for all the kids that were having a hard time learning disabilities that she can kind of see and identify, even with her own class. And, she didn't know what to do about it. That's where she was. But one other thing that was very unique about it was she was very, very artistic. And I know she seems like she has everything, right? Very, very artistic. And so she just was painting and drawing and creating things all the time on her own, but she never kind of put the two together. And then the school sent her to a conference about learning, a teaching conference, and one of the sessions was about learning disorders and how art therapy, and all of a sudden a light went off in her head, and she just knew in her heart of hearts, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not saying this is exactly what has to happen for you, but we need to explore to find out. So all of a sudden her heart and then her abilities, and what her parents thought, you're so smart, you can do anything, get the stable, secure job, or go and do this. But then she realized one of the reasons that she did apply to med school is she did want to help people. She didn't want to help heal, cure, whatever. And then all of a sudden, when this all came together and fell in her lap, all of a sudden she said, oh, this is exactly it. How awesome it is when those things begin to be. The other parts that you need to identify is your personality. One thing I want to say, just as an encouragement to every single one of you, is there's no wrong or right types of personality or better or worse types of personality. There are people who are, for lack of a better word, that are maybe deformed or hurt or somehow, messed up in their personality type because of experiences, because of hurts that they've gone through. But there's nothing better about being an introvert versus being an extrovert. There's no, you know what I'm saying? It's just a matter of being as whole and healthy in your personality and who you are. And I think one of the things that we often do a disservice is that if we don't understand a certain type of personality, then we want to project what we think is better upon them. And oftentimes we can do our children a disservice when their personalities are so different than if both mom and dad are one kind of personality and the kid is something radically different, you can drive each other nuts. And what's also interesting is when your child is exactly like you, with all the same flaws that are like you, it can drive you nuts as well too. But instead of trying to undo that personality, it's to strengthen the weaknesses and to just really celebrate the strengths and make all that child. It's a really fine line. I mean, I can't tell you in a sermon or even that I've done it well myself, but basically the image that I always keep with is work with the grain, work with the flow. Don't go against the flow. And this is something that's really, really hard because when something has worked for you, you want to say, hey, just do it my way. It's a lot harder to learn how their way is. It's very difficult. And I'm having a crash course too, especially because I feel like I'm dealing with things with my girls that normal dads don't have to do as much of. But it's not a bad thing. It's good for my own personality. But personality is not wrong or right. It's a matter of really embracing who God created you to be, and then start to undo some of the damage that's been done through becoming this whole and it's healthy. And just being excited about who you are. That's what you need to do. The last part I want to point out to you among this is the experience factor. And experience is something that maybe when you're younger, you can't really identify it as much. But you probably had some significant experiences. But as I get older, I see how all these things that I experienced in my life, that God is using. And sometimes it's just in terms of wisdom, but sometimes it's just in terms of making decisions. Sometimes people ask me, how do I make this decision? Some younger parents or people who are single, how do you make this decision now? And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't know how to make certain decisions in a cognitive way. I can't tell you what steps I took, but something tells me, and it's probably from my experience that I haven't fully understood, it says, wait, or no. There's an alarm signal, don't do that. Or this person is kind of a little bit shady, better watch out. Those things come because of your experience. Some of them are bad, some of them are good, some of them are, where you made a mistake, or some of them from successes, but all those things put together help you identify and learn. And God doesn't make mistakes. He puts all those things in there. He says, okay, all of this together now somehow, I'm going to use you in a unique way to bless others and to help them to know about God who loves. One of the churches that I had a chance to visit a few times because some of my family lives there in Virginia, a church called McLean Bible Church. And as a pastor, what you do is whenever you go, this is what I do. Whenever I go on vacation or I go to different places, I always look for a church or a pastor who I'm very intrigued in that I want to go and visit. So when I get a chance, I get to go. So it's kind of like on my map. So part of my travel itinerary is eat this and go visit this and go see that, but go to this church on Sunday. That's part of mine. So this was one of the churches that was on my thing, McLean Bible Church. And I don't know if you guys know about it, but it was one of the first churches back in the 90s, and this is how sad it is that it didn't happen until the 90s, that had a ministry, a whole Sunday school department ministry for handicapped, disabled kids, whether they have Downs or physical disabilities, or full blown. I mean, it's a larger church, but even other larger churches didn't have it. So I was totally fascinated. I was totally amazed, but I didn't know the story of how it came about. And when I went there, I was just listening to the message, visiting everywhere, looking in on the things, and it just blew me away. And how amazing this place was in terms of this ministry. But when you go back and you understand the story, here's their story. In 1992, they were leading this church that was growing so fast in this Virginia area, and they had 3 boys, and then their 4th child, their dream child, finally came. They had a daughter, except she had a severe seizure disorder that she was having, and it left her before they diagnosed it and before they got her into medication with severe brain damage. So she needed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constant care and supervision. So the parents, raising 3 boys and trying to do this and all that. I don't know how, I don't know if you guys know, but at some point, if you ever experience where you have to take care of someone all day, all the time, continuously, and I didn't have to do it very long, but I've seen people who've done it for 10, 15, 20 years. It's crazy. It's so wearing. It drains on your relationships. Sometimes it ruins marriages and families, all these things. And so they were worn out. But one of their good friends was very wise and said, hey, I've got a group of about 20 or 30 friends, and we're all going to take one weekend every week, and we're going to take your daughter, and we're going to care for her in our homes. All these close friends. And so they all had to do it about twice a year, is what they're saying. But then they gave these parents Friday and Saturday. I mean, special events they would all do together, but and all of a sudden that radically transformed their lives because now they had relief. They had a relief, that rescue. And from that, from their friend and then from the wife and the mom, and they start talking and they came up with an idea. And then in 2010, it's a separate ministry apart from their church. They created a ministry, Christian-based, but it's an actual facility called Jill's House. Their daughter's name is Jill. And it opened in 2010, 8 years ago. And what it is it's a place with all these rooms, all these playrooms, arts and crafts areas, and like that. It's a big facility. And what they do is they take parents who have these 24 hours a day need children, and they pick them up, and one day of a weekday they can stay over, and then they keep them and they supervise them for 24/7. They're all trained, nurses, all these kinds of special therapists and stuff. They do art therapy, they play together, and then they take them back the next day. And then for some of them on the weekends, from Friday to Sunday, they get to stay, and the parents get lessons. It came out from their own experience. It came out from their own influence that they had within their church and their community. It came out because of all these things that God put together in their lives. So I don't know what the platform, I don't know what the unique thing that you're going to be saying to. It may not be very public, it may not be something anybody ever hears about, but it's something that you're uniquely gifted for. And I don't think you need to despise any of those things. Ultimately, all you want said of you is, I did what God created, shaped, purposed me to do in my life. For some of us, our biggest purpose in our life is to really disciple our children or to hold the family together. For some of us, it may expand more than that because you have a gifting and a teaching ability, so then you start teaching other people how to do that. Some of you will have a platform, some of you won't, but it doesn't matter. That's not what's important. What's important is to be satisfied in realizing this is how God shaped me, and I'm actually doing it. That's when you're going to find you have relief from other people's expectations and thoughts, and instead, you're free to do what you're supposed to do. And here's the beauty of it. When people do what they're created by God to do, then what you begin to see is that they all are doing roles that God's orchestrating, and things start coming together in amazing ways. You'll start realizing that you and your wife, your husband, complement each other, that your kids come on board in a unique way, or your friends or other people, and God starts sending it in, and it all starts to connect. That's so great. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. This is a little bit more low-key, but yes, there's this great commandment that we have. When I was younger and I was first called to ministry, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to preach as much as I can. I have to go on every mission trip and do all these things. And all of those things are great, and it depends on who you are. But at the same time, there's also need for pastors to pastor smaller churches or ethnic churches or big churches, or to just even do their own family, take care of their own family. I know that my stage of my life right now is really to raise my girls. That's one of the biggest purposes that God has, for me to be a godly influence. And that's what it is. And it may change, but it's going to be using the giftings, and talents, and abilities, and personality. Let me end with this. Just maybe somewhat humorous, but also true too. Right? I had this conversation with my older daughter, and a little bit with my younger one. She doesn't know as much, but my older daughter was kind of remembering and commenting on how the way I parent is so much different than it used to be when there was my wife and I, and the difference between the wife. And for a while I thought, oh, man, I'm falling short. I'm being judged and I'm lacking here. I'm not good. And seriously, you start to doubt yourself. And then I was talking with her, and she said, and later on when we were talking, I remember one conversation she said, yeah, it's different. That's not bad. You know what I was reminded of when she said that? It's more like this. It's that I can't be who I'm not. I cannot be who I'm not. God doesn't expect you to do that. If there's something that's wrong or lacking in you, you need to develop it and build it and fix it. But here's where we make so many mistakes. Don't try to change your husband out of who God made them to be. Don't try to change your wife out of the person that God made them to be. Don't change your children out of who God has made them to be. That's what I'm trying to do. And it gives us so much freedom. Okay? Doesn't mean let them do whatever they want. Your husband's a slob, okay, help him to cook. You know, your kids are just like misbehaving. I'm going to say something, you know. But that's not what I'm getting at. But there's some unique personalities, and we need to learn how to nurture and develop that. Because you know what? If we don't, you're going to not only be fighting with that child or your husband or your wife, you're going to be fighting against God's design. That's what he's doing. That's not too bad. Let all of us encourage one another to be people God made us uniquely. Let's pray to this. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you once again for reminding us that we're fearfully, wonderfully, uniquely made. And God, I'm just so thankful that from the very beginning, you created us to be different, man and woman. You created us with unique gifts and talents. None of us has all of it within one person. So I'm thankful that we complement, that we need, that we fit together as a tapestry, as a mosaic. So Father God, help us to see that. Help us to value this.